Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's PropMoto webinar. I am excited about this one. My name is Franco. I'm the editor and co-founder of PropMoto, and today we're going to be talking about AI and data and how to hopefully harness it for real estate investment management. Obviously, AI has broke onto the scene in a way that I don't know if anybody even really expected it to come on as fast as it did. I think when we first started playing around with AI tools, it was kind of a joke, and yeah, this maybe could be useful for some things. And lo and behold, software eventually works, as they say, and it has gotten a lot smarter, a lot better, and it has a lots of potential to be used in commercial real estate, with the caveat that it needs to be trained well, it needs to have good data, and it's probably not as easy as I think most people think. So as always, this is a live recording, and we have some really great people in attendance. We would love to hear from all of you. I won't be saving time at the end for questions. I would love to just hear your questions as we get through this stuff. And if we are able to answer and it's pertinent, I will certainly bring it into the conversation, and we can have you guys participate in this as well. So thanks everybody for joining, and hopefully this will be a useful one for all of us. So without further ado, I would love to intro the panelists. First, I have Eduardo Edu Foss. He's the COO at Dialed.ai. That's an AI-powered underwriting tool. Hi, Edu.
Hi. Hello, everyone.
Next, we have Cliff Lipscomb. He's Chief Executive Officer at Barstow Street Capital. That's an economic and real estate consulting firm. Hi, Cliff.
Hi, good afternoon. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for joining. And last but not least, we have Gabriel Safar. He is head of real estate solutions for Proxet. That's a custom software development shop. Hi, Gabriel.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me here.
Yeah, thanks for joining. So I think first, what I would like to do is just talk about some of the problems, right? And really, we can start with the problems that AI hopefully can solve, and maybe talk about how it can and what it needs to do to be able to solve it, right? So there's a lot that goes into understanding a property, right? Lots of research, right? Every asset management team has analysts that get paid lots of money to do research about properties, both ones that they own and ones they're looking to acquire. And I think that is, in a lot of people's minds, one of the first kind of ways that AI can really be harnessed to maybe not replace those analysts, but at least kind of speed up the work that needs to be done, right? And help those things get done quicker. So maybe we can just talk a little bit about how AI can think like an analyst, right? How it can, I mean, obviously there's lots of assumptions that need to be made for any of these underwriting, research to be done. But I think the smarter AI can certainly start to kind of mimic what I think a good analyst can do. So let's talk a little bit about that problem, right? Of how AI can actually really solve that and do some of that. Edu, I'd love to start with you, because I know you guys are really focused on underwriting it at your company.
Yeah, thanks. I think taking the big picture of real estate, commercial real estate right now, if you're being an analyst or someone who processes loan applications, the reason why the process is broken, all of us feel very anxious about this whole process of underwriting, deal sourcing, capital raising, and due diligence. The reason why it's broken is that for the last 10 years, every other firm has adopted the last generation of software, so that it became an efficient market in the sense that not that information is perfect, but that information is quickly disseminated to everyone equally. Therefore, you don't really have a competitive advantage and a competitive moat on how you go about sourcing deals. Like, for example, in deal sourcing, right? Nowadays, any broker can just e-blast any listing to hundreds of people, or to put the listing on a website. Everyone has access to LoopNet, from Apollo to the new two people firm, investment firm down the street. We all have access to that, so there's no competitive advantage there. Now, to underwriting, we all have access to the quantitative tables that we see in CoStar and other tools. Like, all of us, it's really cheap. So where is the secret sauce there? And to the extent there is any human elements to in that, it's the new analyst who's new at the company, is trying to adjust the comps to to refer to the reality of this unique property, but that's not enough. And then in due diligence was supposed to be that creative moment where the real estate experts see how to create value for the unique site in a unique way that is that taps into their talents. But because no one has a competitive advantage, the firms are very lean, they have few people, so the due diligence process becomes this cursorial sort of checking off the box of the 20 documents that every property can have, and it really misses the point of creating value in the process. And then last but not least, capital raise. If you've been raising money in this environment, you have to reach out to 50, 100 groups, and the rejection rate is really high. Why? Because all those firms are going through the same process. They have to see hundreds of deals. It's a messy process. There's missing data. There's missing documentation. So you end up getting lots of no's. So the way AI comes to solve that is by automating all this grunt work, all this work that relates to reading documents, the putting together the underwriting, the putting together some elements of due diligence, therefore allowing your team, freeing up your team their time to focus on what they're really good at and finding the best deals and closing more deals from their inbox, right? If they're receiving 2,500 deals in their pipeline per month, the AI can automate the underwriting for all that and get you to a better point. So therefore, AI is able to give you back that competitive advantage that you lost, and AI will eventually take over many of the tasks that we currently do. The one thing that it cannot do is to implement itself, and that's a blessing and a curse, because then it allows you to build that temporary competitive mode through AI.
Good point. Yeah. Gabrielle, I know that you work with a lot of companies on this, and I think that the larger companies in particular, right, they kind of think their competitive advantage is the data that they already have, right, the non-public data. And obviously AI is good at grabbing everything, but maybe you can talk a little bit about some of these underwriting assumptions and maybe how they can be kind of tweaked based on what firms know from their own operation.
Yeah, I think, thank you. Clearly, the access to non-public information has always been a cornerstone of how real estate organizations and individuals have been able to create value. And a lot of that comes down to, you talk about underwriting and looking at deals, like the assumptions that you're making. And when you're super local and a business that was historically local, like real estate, you would have people just looking at a specific building on a specific block that could differentiate where a unit is in a building, vacancy rates, and take all of these different pieces of information, process it efficiently in their head, and make judgments about, okay, when this space goes empty, my probability of leasing it is X and I'm gonna get Y. As you become increasingly national or international and less local, it becomes hard to do that because you don't have the local knowledge anymore, or just because you're trying to scale and do things quicker. And that's where AI becomes useful. I think AI is really good at doing a lot of the grunt work. A great quote that I heard, it was that the industrial revolution freed people up from physical drudgery, and AI is there to free people up from mental drudgery. But it's never going to take you 100%, and it's never going to go over the finish line. And in many instances, I think people need to own the outcomes, but what it can do is it can say, I can process all of these data points and I can replicate what people would do with local knowledge if we can feed it those data points. And then I can make an assumption about rent renewals or where cap rates are going to go. And then you can have a dialogue with a person where they can bring the skills to fill in the holes that the models don't have. And you can get to a better outcome to get superior assumptions in underwriting, which changes how you price deals and can make certain deals more competitive or can make you walk from properties. So I think that's one of the ways that I see people using AI.
Sure. And I know that some of the problem is getting this data to a point where it can be used, right? And so, obviously AI is good at extraction. It's been used as extraction for a long time, right? For I'd say probably 10 years now, people have been doing least abstractions and kind of being able to pull that data out. But do you think that that it's able to pull the data and also organize it for itself now? Has it come that far? Gabriel, I'll stick with you
As
on this.
itself in what way? In like a summary or like process it?
Or
If
being
that's
able to actually get itself to a form where it can be used at scale, right? Getting the data into a place and into a data lake that it can really, be harnessed.
Yeah, I do. I've been seeing that with leases. So I built and ran a company that was focused called Lease Pilot that was focused just on leasing. And for years, there was a lot of effort to use different systems to do AI-based lease abstractions. And they were really poor. It was hard. A lot of people time was involved. And then ChatGPT came out and the large language models came out. And they really changed the ability to create abstracts because those models understand language and you can converse and iterate with them. So I do absolutely see now a LLM and different ways, different agents, how they can be implemented, can consume lots of documents and then can summarize them in varied formats that become digestible to people or other systems or computers. Absolutely, I see that
Yeah,
as
that's
very
like so much
successful.
drudgery that gets taken out, right? From that is having to kind of look over
And
that.
that wasn't possible pre ChatGPT. I think there was a real inflection point with ChatGPT. And I don't think that's nominal, that change. I think that was dramatic.
That's a great point. Yeah. Cliff, I'd like to hear from you a little bit. Obviously that there's so much data that gets used in any underwriting of a deal. Obviously real estate data, but since real estate's so tied to local economies and local buildings and all of that, maybe talk to me a little bit about, how that kind of data can be pulled in, right? So it's not maybe just comparables, right? If we really are trying to replicate the job of underwriting, right? There's a little bit of gut feel in there, right?
Sure.
There's a little bit of kind of overall economic understanding of an area. So how does that kind of get play into this?
Sure. I'll start off with a little bit of historical context. So, NAIOP is a commercial real estate group. They asked me to write a report back in October of 2022 about how data analytics were being used inside brokerage, asset management, et cetera. They wanted me to do interviews of folks, Transwestern, Sealy Industrial Partners, very large players, Prologis. And the thing about that period of time, you think about late 2022, this was before that Chat GPT, that big release happened and transformed a lot of things, an inflection point obviously for the industry. But at the time, these very large management companies were not making any kind of data analytics a systematic part of their company. There were a few that were. It was usually how that would manifest is it would be a small person team. It would be two or three people. They would be very inwardly focused on the data that they collected and only use that data for internal purposes, not looking externally. How could this become a data product that we sell to others? They weren't looking. They weren't looking beyond the firm. There's been a massive shift since October of 2022, I think, where a lot of people now are thinking about, how do we use these tools? How do we build a team? How do they access data that's not standardized, not in a data lake across these different silos within the business? I think that conversation certainly has changed in the 2.5 years since I did all those interviews. So to take it then the next step to the data, what I'm doing in more of a research and due diligence capacity is that I'm using these tools to provide for me a lot of summaries, but also I'm dipping my toes into using it for analysis. So I'll give you a real life example from last week. So I'm doing a market analysis on a small rural county in Alabama. And I have a report from 10 years ago that kind of tells me what the service area is going to be for this particular institution. And I literally wrote 2 prompts into Grok, and it was able to replicate the study that was done 10 years ago using the same data, using updated data from the census, and produce it in a way that it was very similar to my voice. And that didn't exist, just a couple of years ago. So just in terms of saving me time, producing product, it's in my voice, it sounds like me, that's a game changer for that kind of work that I do, just on a market analysis level. So that's a very recent use of that tool that probably saved me anywhere between 4 and 6 hours a week.
Cliff, I want to add something to what you said and answering to Franco about the nuance of the data and the data you obtain. So we are at a place where if you need, say, comp information, right? Everyone has access to CoStar. For any given deal, there are probably 20 to 100 people looking at the same data tables with the same quantities in it. And then it's up to the individual analyst and their level of experience to sort of adjust those numbers to the company's view or the things that are unique to that asset, right? And what AI can do is the AI can do that nuance adjusting of the quantities to the unique qualitative and local aspects of the site that Gabriel was mentioning by reading the neighborhood, understanding the events that are happening in the neighborhood, and basically giving you a chain of reasoning of like, hey, okay, your competitor a mile away, the rents are at this level, but he has this and that amenity, and he's close to a metro stop, and he's close to a school, and you're here a mile away. And that's why I think, and this is for each individual input, and as we know, some performers, especially development performers, have 200, 300, 400 inputs. So the AI can go and give you the exact chain of reasoning of why you should tweak, and price to perfection each of those inputs, giving your only qualitative nuance. And you can do it for each one of the 400 inputs for that asset, for 400 assets in a single day for your entire pipeline. So it will quickly be able to inform your analyst so that he can hit the ground running with like a sort of a pre-made business plan or investment memo, hit the ground running and get his analysis to a much greater level of intelligence.
Sure. It's just the speed through. For me, from a diligence perspective, it's just the speed through the funnel, right? Everything comes in through the top of the funnel from a deal flow perspective, the speed that I can get down to that choice set or that set where I need to focus my attention.
Yeah, it's funny because I hear a lot of people talk about, scale, right? Like scale of AI, we can bring in so much more data and we can look at so many more markets. But then, when I talk to people who are really using it, I think the thing that has surprised them is, this aspect, the speed, right? And, being able to use very fresh data, even if it requires kind of drawing some dots between trend lines, right? Maybe you don't have that exact data, but based on the growth rate that we've seen, in other counties or however it works, right? To really be able to have every one of your assumptions happen with the freshest data all the way through that funnel, I think is really a moneymaker for a lot of shops.
And I want to say to that that's absolutely true, but you cannot implement it by just having a pro account on ChatGPT. That's not how it works. For most folks who are not in tech, you have to create a software system that automates, that takes information out of your inbox and process that, as opposed to your analyst, every time there's a deal, oh, let me go to ChatGPT, let me prompt it, let me use the right words. There's a lot of human fatigue involved in that. And what you want is either an off-the-shelf product like Dial does, or something more customized like Proxit does, or the way that Cliff works, where we're actually doing that automatically at scale. You cannot achieve scale by doing it manually.
Right. You could even take it and write the right source code inside, let's say R or Python, that draws on these different pieces of AI, and then literally you just highlight all the source code and hit run, and it does it, or you set it up on a timer like you suggested.
Yep. And Gabrielle, I know that you work with a lot of companies here. I'm interested to hear from you just about, how this data is, how you have to get it ready. I know there's a lot of concerns, particularly if we're using, private data, like we said, of you can't just dump that into ChatGPT, right? Like that just gets vacuumed up by, I mean, whether or not, I guess, OpenAI is making real estate investment decisions on it might be different, but
You can license ChatGPT and have your own private version of it.
right. So it runs inside of your own, your own server, right?
So I think there's a lot you can do with ChatGPT in the pro version. And I actually um, encourage people to start by just playing with ChatGPT. I think, and I would absolutely pay for the subscription and get access to live engagement with fresh data on the internet. I think there's a ton you can do there. To go to getting your data ready, it's a very abstract concept. People talk about data. When I talk a lot about these types of projects with clients, I try not even to use the word data or AI, I try to focus on what are the use cases? Like, what is it that you want to achieve? What's the business problem? If people come to you, and I've had clients come to me and say, "Oh, I want to use AI," like, wrong question or wrong place to start. What are the things that you want to do and that you want to achieve and that you understand why it's important? And then we can work backwards and see if that's an AI use case. And it's the same way with preparing data. Um, Organizations have massive amounts of information, and structuring it and organizing it and verifying it and modeling it is enormously expensive. And it's not realistic to expect that companies are going to be writing, seven-figure checks annually, which is what it costs to keep all of your information fresh, structured, and modeled. So what you do is you start from an endpoint, a result, and you think, what are the specific pieces of information I need to achieve that outcome? And then you work backwards all the way to the source. One of the things that we do with clients is we do just like a complimentary 4-hour workshop where we say, give us an outcome that you want, and let's work backwards all the way to the data sources. And then we can build forward
Mm-hmm.
what needs to happen from, oh, I'm getting this information, financial information from Yardi. How do I know it's right? What format does it need to be used by these other programs? What are the connections? How does it need to get enriched? And then you can build your ultimate outcome. So that's how we approach those problems.
And I'm sure that process is invaluable too, just because every company has their own processes, right? It's got to fit within, like large shops have investment teams that have to present, so there's this whole other aspect of, how does it fit into the framework of the company and how, who are the people that are going to be using it? I'm sure all of these.
But you
Uh,
can get a lot done when you focus. When you tell people like we're not going to boil the ocean, give me one thing that like we want to solve, and let's just do a deep dive on that. That can create other ideas and lead you go into different directions.
mhm.
One of the things I've seen inside larger organizations is that you have to have a culture of innovation built that's coming from the C-suite. They have to want to improve. They have to understand the value proposition of using these tools that we're talking about, AI broadly speaking. They have to understand that there's benefits not only to the company from the bottom line in terms of efficiencies, but like I mentioned earlier from that study I wrote a couple of years ago, there was really no discussion. Hey, what kind of data products could we create that would be externally focused that people would pay for?
Great point. I have an interesting question here that kind of plays into what we're talking about. Is this idea of the AVM, right? And this has been an elusive goal of the real estate industry for a while, particularly commercial, right? Because it's so hard. I mean, just do you guys really see AVMs being,
What is
reliable?
that?
Ultimate evaluation models.
Yes.
Is
Yep.
Yeah.
that? Yeah. Yeah. Oh, it's here. It's the AI to the extent if you're asking me by AVMs, I'm supposing you're saying AIs that do pro forma models or fill out pro forma models. Currently, we have all the tools to make this a reality like this year, and we're already experimentally using that, and there are firms that are using that. And the if you see, just today I saw this interesting graph where it's the human performance in various tasks. And if you see the math performance, right? If one used GPT a year ago, the math was not really great. It was like giving even wrong like subtractions and additions. But now it's skyrocketing the mathological side. So it's you can absolutely count on AI taking over like the more analytical number crunching side of the analysis. Yeah, for me, it's a simple answer. I don't know if it can elaborate
I
much
am
more on that.
interested though,
Yeah.
Edu, to dig a little deeper into this, which is, one of the things that I think is dangerous about AI is its confidence,
Mm.
right? And so obviously when you are getting in an AVM, particularly for commercial building, right, which could be a lot of question marks. Okay, we don't know. There's no comps that really are that great, right? We don't really know what the lease situation is in some comparable buildings. Do you think that you can build into it having it tell you the confidence, right? Because that I think, could really help people understand how much weight they should place in there.
Yeah. Yeah, you can build on it some sort of rating of the inputs themselves, like some sort of probability. Uh, Also, like there is this well-studied human bias to require from machines a higher standard of delivery than humans. If you look at how analysts work, I was an analyst for 8 years. Like analysts make lots of mistakes too. Like, and sometimes
And they're
assumptions
overconfident too.
are wild guesses, right? And you don't know where the numbers are coming from, and sometimes I've seen pro formas where the pro forma people are not checking with the vendors who would give you the number for like a year or 9 months or things like that. So it's got to be an apples to apples comparison. But yeah, I think all of that is doable. It's vetted, and again, it's in the I believe the future of real estate in the next 1 year, 5 years will be teaming with AI in all those various aspects in construction and architecture, in capital raise, in underwriting. And the question is more, where's the biggest bang for your buck? Because it's going to inject itself into all those workflows.
But this shouldn't all feel so futuristic or out there. You can think about I think about calculations, and it's just like a really good calculator. If it's following rules and patterns and it's establishing or taking advantage of um, principles that are known, these tools, you can interact with them. I think a good models, I don't know if there are many Iron Man fans here, but Jarvis, and you think about the way Tony Stark works with Jarvis, like this is probably lost on a lot of people, but for those of you who are Marvel fans,
I'm
like
with you.
Tony Stark is still a genius, even though Jarvis is crunching like numbers and he says to Jarvis, do this. He has to know what he's telling that machine to do, what he's telling that AI agent, and how he wants to mold that AI agent, and what outcome you want and what the parameters are. Like you're not removing that level of responsibility for the output. It's a tool that is going to calculate, that is going to process in ways that the user needs to control, bound, gate, and understand how they're ultimately going to consume it. And the quality of the output is only as good as the direction and the interaction that that AI agent has with the individual human that is engaging with it. So it's not that different conceptually than using a calculator, using a phone. It's a tool, just like any other tool. It's just faster and smarter and can do more.
Great point. So we got some Marvel fans here. So I think your reference landed on some people. Little known fact actually is the first ever reference to a smart building was in an Iron Man comic when he was talking about his headquarters. So
Dark Tower? Yeah.
yep. Yeah. So, you know, that's a life imitating art, I guess we could call it. You know, we have a question here that is a little difficult to ask, but I want to throw it out there anyways, which is, you know, can you give specific examples of some firms using AI and walk through, you know, what they're doing? Obviously, there's NDAs that everybody has probably signed, but you know, maybe can we, you know, redact some of the important information and kind of give some very specific examples of exactly how, you know, AI is really being leveraged by particularly probably big successful shops.
Yeah, if I may go first, because I think my product is very straightforward. So at Dialed, what we do for several clients, I won't name them, but these are usually institutional lenders who have 20 billion plus assets under management or private equity groups. And now more and more we're getting developers, investment bankers, advisors. But basically the way they use our tool, it's an investment memo. It's an AI written investment memo and business plan of sorts. So they have their, you know, pipelines with anywhere between 25 to 200 deals they're looking at in any given month, and they want to push probably 5 of those to the investment committee and to start doing due diligence. So they come to us, they tell us a few inputs about the site. Hey, here's the address, here's the asset class, here's our plan for the site. Maybe it's renovation, value add, development. And then with that, we create an investment memo for them, a report for them. That's saving them time from their analyst team would have, you know, to spend 3 weeks, and it's probably 2 analysts, and it's probably maybe sometimes a consultant. And they're doing all of that in a matter of hours as opposed to days, and then therefore they're able to pick the best deals out of that, you know, list of 25 to 200 deals. So that's how they're using it in our case. And then as Gabriel alluded to, there's a degree of customization that goes beyond this off-the-shelf product, where they're maybe asking us, can you change the layout of the investment memo, which is a relatively simple thing, or they may ask for things that are a bit more evolved, like, for example, can you have this investment memo tap into our company criteria and the deals that we said yes or no in the past? Can you use that sample of deals as a way to guide the AI to analyze the site the way we would? So that's how we're starting to see folks using AI in a more automated fashion, as opposed to you know, which, as Gabriel said, is a great way to get acquainted with its tools, is to have an account and test it, but a GPT account and test it, but you get to the ceiling very quickly, and the ROI is limited. So that's what we're starting to see in terms of how to underwrite with AI.
I can add to that a little bit. So I made sure to ask his permission before I brought this up. But a buddy of mine, Richard Wilson, runs a family office club, and if you're a family office club member, you have access to some new AI tools that he has created. He let me do a beta test of one called Dewey. Dewey was trained on approximately 100 to 150 documents, and from pitch decks to private placement memoranda to confidential information memorandum SIMs, etc. And what I used it for was to run documents through and to generate a frequently asked questions document, which a lot of sponsors, when they pitch you a deal, they oftentimes don't include that. And there's often very important information in there. It's very easy to go through an FAQ and identify questions that can get me to NO quickly if I'm diligencing a deal, and then I can move on. So I used it to create an FAQ, and literally it gave me 5 pages of questions. I filled them out, and I was done in probably half the time that it would have taken me otherwise. So that's just one example of that's just one of probably a suite of, let's say, 5 or 6 tools related to FAQs, pitch decks, and things like that he makes available to his members. I'm aware of that.
Thanks for that. Great example. Gabrielle, do you have any maybe specific examples? Obviously, without giving any sensitive information out, but just how really AI is being harnessed, and maybe a step by step of how someone got there.
With specific clients?
Sure. Like
Yeah.
I said, you don't have to give names, but maybe just how they are using it.
So yeah, it depends on, we're using AI in a very generic way. There's different types of AI that do different types of things. And so there are automation use cases which use agents to execute functions in an intelligent way. So, for example, a lot of interest around coding, accounts payable using AI, where you can
Mhm.
have, invoices get billed to the right general ledger account and then get allocated to the appropriate fund for investment managers. You have a lot of activity, and that's one type of AI where you have automation. Other types where I see, a lot of excitement and interest around is just the simple interaction with a chat GPT, like private chat GPT, to get information as like a help desk function. So for residents, you can have them engage with a help desk function. Um, that's really like a powerful tool. As long as you have the data organized, your manuals, where you get information, you can ask that agent questions and it can serve up private information. That can
Mhm.
also just be using agents to query data like, I want to know information about my leases. So if your leases are structured right, I'm familiar with use cases of people being able to say, rather than looking at a report or a dashboard, just to say, tell me how many leases in this portfolio have kickouts or co-tenancies that I need to be aware of. And what would that mean if Kmart, dating myself, goes bankrupt, for example? So these are the types of use cases that I see.
Great. I'll provide an example from some research that I've done. I interviewed the team at Berkadia. They are building out a very robust AI tool, and it's like kind of what you were talking about. It's to grab any of their kind of huge, vast documents that they have, right? You can query it, it can bring you back whatever you want. But they actually they haven't built this yet, or they might have since I've talked to them, but they were working on it, and their prediction was a really interesting one to me, which is that eventually AI will replace this idea of dashboards. Right. I know all of these tech companies kind of,
Yep.
smash their head against the wall trying to
Yep.
figure out what metrics, which dashboards, right? And she said, well, that's antiquated. Now every user can just build their own, like, hey, build me a dashboard with XYZ metrics for these properties, and then I can see it in a way, present the data in a way. And I guess that
Yeah.
hadn't really landed on me in that way, where it's not just the process, it's
No,
actually
but getting there is here's the big challenge. Like, this all sounds great. However, the amount of work that goes into having your data organized, even the largest and most sophisticated companies that I've seen have a tough time being able to act at scale on like complex, big problems like this. I see where there's a lot more opportunity is using it for like specific tasks. You think about a company like Edo's company, the AI is doing a specific thing. There are boundaries around it. You can identify those boundaries, and when you identify those boundaries, you can control and quality test the specific inputs, and you can get a great output. I mean, it sounds awesome to say, like, I'm going to eliminate dashboards because I'm just going to ask my AI agent anything. In my experience, that's boiling the ocean. You better be ready to spend, $100 million. That's what I think Suffolk construction spent $100 million on organizing their data so that they can activate their like AI initiative. Very, very few companies have that level of appetite for budget in this environment, especially. And that's like a huge amount of vision goes out to Suffolk Construction and their team, but like they are an outlier.
I want to concur with what Gabriel said and add that in the end of the day, every aspect of our work will be teaming with AI. So the question becomes prioritization. Where's the biggest bang for the buck? What processes I can implement with AI now, have quick wins, have a lot of return on my investment, and then keep pushing AI like software. At some point, software, the SaaS model was something new. At some point, of course, the internet was something new, and eventually it creeps into every aspect of our work.
Got a question here about hallucinations. I know we talked a little bit about, giving a score, but how I personally, in my use of AI, I've seen them go down, right? There seem to be less hallucinations, but if
Yeah.
you're making a big investment decision, I think you should certainly still double check everything, right? So, is there maybe an AI for that, right? Can that be automated too, the kind of the double checking aspect?
Yeah, I think there are two aspects to it. So the topic of hallucinations came up originally when people were asking open-ended questions to GPT. That's basically just life questions or philosophical questions or medical questions. When you're working with a close-ended list of documents or data sources, and you can sort of cross-check across data sources, and you can get vetted sources of information, and you have well-written prompts, all those things together, plus what you just described, Franco, which is an improvement in the AI LLMs themselves. All of that leads to a much lower hallucination to make it more concrete. Imagine you have to, find through AI what a rent comp is charging. Well, that AI, it depends on what you're feeding that AI. If you're feeding like there are 5 different rent analysis data feeds that I'm offering to the AI. Well, now all of a sudden it's reading all of those 5, so it's becoming sometimes even more accurate than a human would, because a human may just look at one of those and do not have enough time to go out to those. So there are methods and ways to make it a more of a closed-ended system and hallucinate way less.
And hallucinations aren't unique to AI agents. Like I've managed large teams of people, and I've gotten fed a lot of lines of stuff that aren't true. And so I think just like working with A, to go back to the Jarvis model, or go back to it is something that you interact with and you ask it an iterative source of questions. So I've gotten back answers that just don't seem right from AI. And you'll go back and say, really, is that true? Like, please, like, show me your sources here. And then it will source things. Or you ask questions that are less likely, that like you build tests in the questions that you ask that have benchmarks that you can measure against to be able to understand whether or not what you're being told is accurate. I'm the same way with people, though. Like there's no different in the way that I would interact with a subordinate or someone that I'm working with, just because um, I generally I've had too many experiences with people making assumptions and people talking about different things, which is exactly what's happening with the AI agent sometimes.
I had that same problem early on, so I would go back and I'd ask for information from some AI tool, and I noticed that some of the hyperlinks that were being generated were fake, just an amalgamation of words that sort of made sense. So the one extra step of saying, please verify that these hyperlinks truly exist, saved a bunch of headache. That what I was getting was, actually truly sourceable, from some legitimate place on the web.
Yeah, in my own experience, I know that sometimes it struggles to, it's like maybe your aunt or something, it struggles to see which website is probably reputable and which one's not, like, oh, well, if it came from this company's marketing website, like maybe that's not the numbers that I want to use on this, right? But I think it's certainly it's getting there.
Yeah, I've had good success recently too with just simple tables being generated and stuff like that. Say, if you're not very good at that, and that's been a time saver as well.
I got another great question I want to get to, but I do want to put a resource in here. Just what we're talking about, how hard it can really be to completely, become an AI driven company. I have written about a company called Two Sigma. They are as close to what I would call a quant in commercial real estate as I have seen. And when you see what they have had to do, I mean, it took them 5 years. I think they have 200 PhDs on their team, right? 100 data scientists. Like the pull that it took them to get to this point is, to all your point, like this is not something that the average shop can realistically do, right? And so I think, having this kind of idea of, okay, we'll start with some smaller problems, we'll start implementing it, and then grow is probably a lot more of a reachable goal than, hey, let's just be, an AI first data, CRE company, because that's really, really tough. So if anybody wants to read up on Two Sigma, there's that for you. There's a great question here that I want to bring up, and I see, Cliff, you are typing an answer, but I'm going to bring it in live here, which
Sure.
is,
Yeah.
what can you do to start, right? Besides, obviously getting the higher ups excited about all the money they're going to make off of it. It's, again, I think it can be a little bit, from what I've seen, most of the literature and marketing around AI is like, oh, just, turn it on and all your problems are solved, right? And then you actually, talk to someone, they're like, well, what, I really need that kind of specific step by step on how to do it. So I'd love to hear from all of you, like, what is that kind of step number one? Cliff, we'll start with you, since it looks like you already have a nice little answer queried up.
Oh, yeah, sure. So the question was about data analyst, small local brokerage. What can you do to take first steps? I mean, the first step is just to make sure that you develop that skill for yourself, because if it's something that you see value in, then you want to work someplace where they see that value as well. And having hired and fired, a lot myself, people who come to me with good ideas, well researched, well thought out ideas, those end up being the change makers in the organization.
Great point, right? To kind of take that on, not maybe wait for your company to push it to you, just take it on yourself, start getting educated, and then hopefully be that champion of AI.
Correct.
Andrew, how about you? You have any good examples of good ways to maybe get a toe in?
Yeah, I think here in this call we're suggesting a repertoire, a spectrum of solutions. Some are custom made, some are more off the shelves. It depends on the problems of the organization's facing. I keep getting to, I think the big picture message that we're past is that there are all those use cases for AI, infinite uses, and you can try to boil the ocean, but you have to prioritize. And therefore, the only thing that AI cannot do is to implement itself, right? So, and I agree with Franco. If you're a champion in your organization of AI, I think folks really progress in their careers by showing that level of care and by studying how to implement. I would have to see this person's organization. I think every organization is different. We're trying to solve a very specific problem about deal sourcing, underwriting, and so on. But eventually it has to make, as others have argued here, it has to make into the C-suite. If it's a large organization and it needs to be implemented across the organization, it has to come at some point. The C-suite has to buy into the vision and help implement it, because they're not, I guess, especially in real estate, like an AI designated a buyer of AI, or even like the vendor processes in bigger organizations are not necessarily suited for this type of thing, because AI sometimes is cross departments, and you have to implement across departments. So it's really, I think, on a one by one basis. And
Gabrielle,
so
I know you talked about your 4-hour kind of crash course. Maybe walk us through how you kind of coach people on starting at the beginning and not the end.
Well, I guess where I would start, if you don't have a subscription to ChatGPT, like that's where I would start. I would just start using and playing with ChatGPT in my job to make me as an individual faster and better. And I would start by looking at what are the things that I do on a day-to-day basis. And if I want to get home faster to my kids or spend less time in the office, what are the things that I could do to like use ChatGPT to be faster? And you can feed, just in case people don't realize, you can use something like ChatGPT to, collect information that's publicly available, or you can upload information and ask it to do certain things. And so that's one thing that's really easy and that's low cost. I try to start with use cases. And so the question I would ask is someone is trying to figure out how do I use AI in my organization? I would start with, well, what are your goals? Like, what are your business goals? What does your business want to achieve? What are the big picture things that matter for you or the people that you're going to be asking permission to be successful? And then once I start identifying like what my objectives are and what the organizational goals are, I would be thinking, well, what are the activities or the actions that I can take that have an impact on achieving those goals? And I usually look at that and I apply like a 2x2 matrix where I look at feasibility and impact, and those actions that have the biggest magnitude effect on achieving goals get prioritized, and those things that are the most complex to implement get deprioritized, and you wind up with a sweet spot of things that are easy to do and actually have the biggest magnitude of helping organizations achieve their goals. Where I think things get hard is that framework's really simple, but people might not understand what are the activities that I could do and what are the things that AI can do that can help me with those activities. So what we often do is we'll just take 4 hours and we'll meet with clients, and either they have a specific use case, they say, we want to do this. And we'll look at what they want to do and we'll do an evaluation of their systems, just working backwards. All gets done in 4 hours. And we just take from that outcome and just drive back and just relentlessly ask questions. Where does this come from? Where does that come from? And we paint a picture in our head. And then once we paint the picture in the head, we can say, okay, if you want to do this, this is the steps. This is what you need to do to get out there. And again, we can do that in 4 hours because it's order of magnitude level of granularity. If someone doesn't have a specific outcome, where I would start is I would be doing a charrette or some sort of session where you would just go through identifying those goals and then be coaching them on the actions that you can take to implement those goals just based on experience. And I think those types of things could also get done in 4 hours. I'm a big fan of compressing time and not leaving an infinite amount of time to talk about things, because I think the law of diminishing marginal returns kicks in. Like you spend, more time you spend, it's not the more outcome you get. So that's how I would approach it.
Agree
That's a
with
great
you on
point.
that for sure.
Yeah.
I'll add one other thing about use case, if you don't mind. I used Grok recently to actually do a discounted cash flow analysis, and it actually did a pretty good job. This is for a life sciences deal, so life science real estate, pharmaceutical production. You have to make certain assumptions about what the generic market looks like, what the market for a particular generic would look like, what that decline curve looks like over time as the branded version comes off market and the generic picks up in terms of market share. But it actually did a pretty good job from a discounted cash flow perspective to justify the use of that piece of real estate as life science real estate.
And that's a complex mathematical formula, right? A year ago, I would see mistakes even in subtraction and addition, and
Sure.
and now we're seeing things like that. So it's incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I certainly have seen, that it's, in my mind, it's a little bit like teaching your kids how to ski, right? Is that the wins compound, but one big loss, and it can really take the wind out of your sails. So I just know, from all the companies that we interview, a lot of them were very gung ho about investing in AI, and then, come back at a conference a year later and they're like, oh, we lost some money on it. And
Yeah.
it's all a bunch of hooey, so kind of avoiding, I think, one of those big losses that can set an organization back might be critical.
I think the key is like you can't assume it's not going to make mistakes. And so like I think the discounted cash flow is like a great sort of calculate. You can run lots of calculations with it and it's great. You need to be able to, you know, double check it at times. And sometimes just like when you're trying to figure out complex things, getting direction, like directionally moving you in the right way, where you can use an AI agent to move you in the right to run these calculations, run this. You come to an insight and you say, wow, that's interesting. I'm onto something. And then you redo it yourself. But it's moved you in the right direction and removed all of the effort and drudgery of getting to the point where you can skip like 5 steps of the process of getting to a valid idea.
Well, great. I think that is an amazing point to end on. I just want to remind everyone that if you would like to be introduced to any of our panelists here, I'm happy to do so. Please send me an email. It's franco@propmodo.com. That's FRANCO @propmodo.com. Please sign up for our upcoming webinars and, sign up for our newsletter, read everything we got coming out. Hopefully, it's as useful as we try to make it to be. So just want to thank everybody so much. Gabriel, Edu, Cliff, thanks guys for joining me, and I hope everybody has a great rest of the day.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone.